Hi, I'm Father Peter, pastor of St. Joseph's Church in Kings Park, and joining me today for this very special episode on the Eucharist is my classmate, Father Robert Armato. Father Bob comes to us from the Diocese of Brooklyn and had recently retired, and those of you who are from the parish have, of course, recognized that he has become our weekend help. So I'd like to welcome Father Bob to our podcast, and maybe you could just take a moment to give us a little bit of background on yourself, a little introduction.
Thank you, Father Peter. Well, as you said, I'm a retired priest of the Diocese of Brooklyn, but I like to say retired from administration, not from ministry.
Trust me, I'm looking forward to that day.
Yeah, so now I only sign the back of checks, not the front. So that's a major blessing. But I've been born and raised in Maspeth in Queens. I've served in parishes both in Brooklyn and in Queens over the course of the years when I was in more active ministry. Before retirement at the end of June. So it's coming up on 2 years now that I'm retired, and about a year and a half that I've been helping out over here on weekends here at St. Joseph's. Before seminary, I was 16 years in the insurance industry, but also I think since probably 1971, being active in different forms of ministry in the parish. Whether it was teaching CCD or training altar servers, serving as a lector, as an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion, different ways before going into the seminary and meeting you.
Interesting thing was neither of us knew each other before the seminary,
No.
but both of us were delayed vocation, so we both came in with some business experience, you a bit more than I. But I think that had contributed a lot to our ability when we did become pastors to be able to deal with some of the administrative parts of it.
For sure.
They don't tell you in the seminary what it's going to be like when you become a pastor. It's one of those hidden secrets so that you'll say yes.
Yeah. One of my pastors, as I was going through the routine, Father John, now Monsignor John Harrington, said, "Bob, it's like being brought into a darkened theater and you sit down and little by little, the curtain goes up and the lights come up and you will see things you never imagined before."
So true.
That's what it's like being a pastor sometimes.
So true. Well, even like if you remember when we were first ordained, when they sent us out, you got people coming up and saying things to you, and you're like, is that for real?
Yeah.
And it turns out, yeah, no, people really have these things going on in their lives, and they do turn to the priests quite a bit. So we had that privileged place, if you will, of knowing a lot more about what happens in people's lives because they do trust it to us, especially if they're looking for counseling or confession.
Sure.
So we're coming up on the Feast of Corpus Christi. The day this drops is the Friday before Corpus Christi. And that's a solemnity that's been on the calendar since the 1200s, 1264, if I'm correct, was added to the liturgical calendar. Because, again, we needed to have this feast on the calendar that emphasized the real presence of Jesus Christ in the most Holy Eucharist.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout history, we've had our ups and downs with the Eucharist. So there have been times where different things have happened where people's faith in the Eucharist had depleted or dropped. But from day one, it's even in the Bible that the real presence of Jesus Christ in the most Holy Eucharist. Of course, what Jesus did at the Last Supper, but even in the letters of Paul, where he speaks about is not the bread we eat, the body of Christ. Right. It's not the wine we drink, the blood of Christ.
Right.
So this real presence, contrary to what some of your Protestant friends might have said to you, this real presence has been a doctrine of the Church pretty much from the Bible till now.
Yeah. Well, there's what gave rise to the feast is the Albigensian heresy, which said that the material world is evil. And therefore, the bread and the wine, as they would simply refer to it, cannot be the body and blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, true God and true man. And so they denied the real presence in the Eucharist. And so the Church then comes up with a more formal declaration, more formal way of focusing attention and celebrating the real presence of Christ in the sacrament of the Holy Eucharist, and involving such marvelous theologians as St. Thomas Aquinas, not only writing about it, but also composing the hymns that we still use today. Tantum ergo pange lingua. Almost 800 years later.
You know, it's interesting. as I say, yes, in biblical times they had an appreciation for the real presence of Christ, but there has been a development of doctrine. So if you went up to St. Peter or St. Paul and used the word transubstantiation,
No.
I don't think they would have had a clue what you were talking about.
No.
But that was language that Thomas Aquinas started to develop and help us develop at this time when the appreciation, like, how could this possibly be?
Right.
And to put it into very simplistic terms, what appears to be bread underneath its substance, what makes it what it is what has changed. Not its appearance, but its substance.
Right.
So down through the ages, we've been able to develop and get a better understanding of the Eucharist. I think we've gone through a period in our most recent history where, let's face it, there was a lot of strange things after the Second Vatican Council, not intended by the Council Fathers, but strange things that started happening in parishes where, certain things took away from the centrality or the preciousness of the Eucharist by doing things like, beer and pizza liturgies. And
believe me, I went through that in high school.
And I said, to some of the young people when I talked to them, I said, I lived through this. You might have heard it as legend. I lived through it. There were these things that were going on that turned the focus away from the Eucharist. So there's two things that I believe that left us, at least up until recently, with a lot of people confused about the true nature of the Eucharist. The first was a movement away from holy hours. Previous to the Second Vatican II, if they had some sort of a paraliturgical service, they would expose the Blessed Sacrament, have prayers before the Blessed Sacrament, and then have whatever other thing they would do. Mm-hmm. After the Second Vatican Council, and let's face it, in both of our dioceses after the Second Vatican Council, we were teeming with priests. We had plenty of priests in every parish. So what did they do? They added more masses to the schedule and moved away from doing it at a Eucharistic Holy Hour.
Right.
So one of the things that I think that did was place more of the emphasis, where I believe it was rightfully to be done, on the celebration and the sacrifice of the Mass. The problem was they started to turn the Mass into all these other little things. So all of these other things started happening at the Mass that never really were intended. Mm-hmm. Award services and declarations and all these different things that were supposed to happen. And it, I think, kind of took away from what really is happening at the Mass. Now you tie that in with all the people who would blame the change to the new rite. I don't think the change to the new rite had anything at all. I think it was all these other things that had become accretions into the liturgy.
Well, I think another problem, though, was also the removal of the tabernacle.
In many cases from the center of the church.
When churches were redone because of the new liturgy and freestanding altars and whatever, and in many places, the Blessed Sacrament and the tabernacle was placed either onto a side altar or put in a separate chapel even. Now, in a place like St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, you need the Blessed Sacrament chapel off to the side as a prayer place. You can't have hundreds of thousands of people walking through and pretty much ignoring the Blessed Sacrament. But in most of our churches, I remember Bishop Daly, God rest him, coming into one church and saying, where'd they put the Blessed Sacrament? He couldn't find it. It was over on the side, and so and again, since it's been brought back to its original position was.
And again, we're starting to see a revival with all these Eucharistic pilgrimages and other things that the bishops have started to do to bring back some of that reverence and that focus.
Yeah.
Again, it wasn't intentional. I don't think anybody was intentionally trying to take away the importance of the Blessed Sacrament. Right. I think just what started to happen is the casualness. Yeah. The casualness of what happened. I remember in my first assignment, they had invited some company to come in and do some sort of a concert thing that was supposed to be a prayerful concert thing. When I saw them all walking in with cups of coffee and equipment and all of a sudden, and all these guys coming in and in these things, I took the Blessed Sacrament out and I put it in the back because I felt that this was being disrespectful to the Blessed Sacrament. Well, when someone came in for the service and they saw that the tabernacle was empty, they got upset. And I said, I'm not going to have the Blessed Sacrament mocked by these people who are coming in. I'm sure the service is going to be beautiful, but we have to have a certain demeanor, no matter what we're doing in the church, a certain demeanor in front of the Blessed Sacrament.
Right.
Even when we're cleaning the church, a reminder, I always remind myself, even when I'm setting up things in the church, a reminder, I make sure I genuflect, I make sure I make reference to the tabernacle.
He's still there.
He's still there. But down through the generations, especially more recent generations, a real casualness has cropped up to the point now where here in the parish, we've started that little announcement before people come to Holy Communion. I don't know you're thinking about it, but we were talking about it in one of the staff meetings, and even the extraordinary ministers have been noticing people would just take the host and start to walk off with it, or kids that just were coming up that looked like they had no idea where they are or what they were doing. So to just bring that focus back again, that this isn't something casual, this is actually something very important. I know between us, we've been priests for over 31 years each. You're a week longer than I am. But in addition to that, between us, more than 30 years of pastor's experience. What were some of the experiences you had as a pastor that really alerted you to the fact that we need to reignite reverence for the Blessed Sacrament?
A weekly reminder, the noise level in church before Mass begins. And for special occasions, confirmation, First Communion, weddings, you'd think that there's a Knicks game that's about to take place any moment. Just that sense of that we've lost of coming into a holy place and settling down before entering into the mystery of the celebration. Even in my own experience of seeing people entering the church with their cup of coffee still. With their cup of coffee and, something to use it to wash down. Well, that I can't remember seeing too many of that, but definitely people coming with a soda or a cup of coffee, and they're coming to attend the Mass, which is even more shocking. One of the things that I think is important for people to remember, we're supposed to have a fast before we go to Holy Communion. This is one of these simple little things that I think people have forgotten. They went from a 12-hour fast previous to a 1-hour fast in the new rite. I don't think 1 hour is enough. I try to do longer than that myself. But people will ask, well, is it an hour before I receive or an hour before? And I say, oh, time out. What are we, going to be minimalists here? It's an hour before you get to church, because if, God forbid, you came in a little late and they're giving out communion already. Heaven forbid. Heaven forbid. No, when I was a kid, it was the midnight fast. And then I think it was Pius XII who brought it down to 3 hours. And then after the council was brought down to 1 hour before receiving communion. Again, I think it's just that reverence for me. Is food going to make the Blessed Sacrament less than the Blessed Sacrament if I have food inside me? Of course not. But it's that preparation, that word that you were using before, not just entering a church and quieting down my soul a little bit, but also through a physical thing, like just not eating food for a little while so that I'm clear, that I'm focused. That's just one of the little things I think that has somewhat contributed to some of this irreverence, because now people say, oh, what's the big deal? The church, don't have to fast anymore. It's no big deal. No, it's still a big deal. Another reason why we did add that little speech that we give before is because I think there's a lot of people who have lost that understanding that you should never receive unworthily, as St. Paul says. You should be in a state of grace to receive Holy Communion. Now, pre-Vatican II, it was at the other extreme. Almost nobody went to communion, and if they did, the Saturday confession lines were so long so that people could receive on Sunday. They were. Now I think we're at the other extreme. I think there are a lot of people who hardly ever go to confession, if at all, and yet still come up for communion. I've tried to make this pastoral but clear in some cases, and the way we worded it I don't think is offensive at all, because I don't want someone to get scrupulous on me either, but to be in a state of grace requires having been to the sacrament of reconciliation. You have to go to confession. If someone hasn't been to confession for more than a year, that right there is grave matter. And if you've not been to confession, then you're not in a state of grace if you haven't been for more than a year, just on that alone. Right. I always looked at it as at least part of the Easter duty, which, by the way, this is being shown next. It's going to be on next Friday. This coming Friday. Well, today, the Solemnity of the Most Holy Trinity is the cutoff date for Easter duty. So, but it shouldn't be just a matter of simply an obligation, but rather a sense of love with which we receive the Eucharist, and love with which we prepare for the Eucharist. I mean, if we're coming to somebody's coming to our house, we want to make sure that the house is properly prepared, properly cleaned, We're doing it not out of fear that they're going to give us the white glove test, but we do it out of love for the one who's coming to share with us. Same way with Christ. Christ comes to share his life with us. We should be prepared in a loving way to receive him openly.
And just to remind you to myself and to everybody out there, I'm not the one to judge you on that. That's a subjective thing that you have to basically take to prayer. And if you discover that you've committed a mortal sin, you should abstain yourself. If someone comes up to me on the communion line, that is not the place for me to make a stink or a big deal,
Right.
unless there's going to be scandal involved.
Right.
So I kind of remind myself of that as well, because there are some people out there that would prefer, Father, to just kick everybody off. I know your situation. I know your kid. That's not for us to do. That's for you to discern and to pray about.
Right. Our presumption is that whoever's coming up is in a proper state to receive the Eucharist.
One of the other things that I think that has really thrown a wrench into it is this whole lack of appreciation for the moral evils that we call sin. There are 10 commandments, not just one. So when someone comes up to me and goes, well, you know, Father, I didn't kill nobody.
It's a good start.
Well, thank you very much for not killing people. I really like that. But, you know, that's only one of the 10. So can we move on to some of the other ones? Like, you know, do you have other gods in your life? And most people would say no. And I say, well, the way you stare at your phone sometimes, that could be your God. That's taking you away from your responsibilities before God.
Yeah.
Using the name of the Lord. So many people, it's so funny. It's like, you know, they go, oh, Jesus Christ, you praise his name.
Amen.
And you can just start in prayer, right? Because otherwise, yeah, but it's become so matter of fact. Like people sometimes use these expressions without even realizing that they just committed a grave moral offense in the eyes of God.
Right.
Keeping holy the Sabbath. Now, this is the one that always gets me. Keeping holy the Sabbath. We've gone from, back when I was young, when you were young, 85 to 90% of Catholics in the neighborhood every week in church. Every week, to 15% of Catholics in the neighborhood going to church. I don't understand how we got that far afield. But missing Mass once on a holy day or on a Sunday, missing Mass once with not a valid reason,
Right.
or, you know, if you do it with intent or just because, oh, I'm going to go to the ball game, I'm not going to go to church, that's grave moral evil. And if done with the intention of, you know, missing Mass, that's mortal sin.
Yeah. Well, going to Mass as a family was an integral part, but then there was always the family component. You know, once you got home, you didn't simply go about your business. I mean, the first place when I was a kid, the stores were closed on Sunday. We still had the blue laws here in New York State, New York City, but it was a family day, not only for your immediate family, the nuclear family, but also for the extended family. And you would see aunts and uncles and cousins. And now
But the difference was the whole neighborhood was doing it.
the whole neighborhood was doing that. I mean, there were times when finding a place to park on the street was difficult because families were coming together for one thing.
He's from Queens. We have a lot more space out here.
Yeah, wait.
I was a kid. I see cars parking along the thing here, and I say they're doing country parking because they're leaving like a half a car length between them. You're in the city, you get 3 inches. That's
it.
But neither here nor there. Yeah, again, everybody was doing it, so you didn't feel like, you know, that you were the exception.
Right.
Whereas today, the family that does that is more the exception. These young parents, I get exhausted listening to what their Sundays are like. I got to take this kid here, that kid there. I got to stop at this thing. And by the end of the day, they're looking forward to get back to work so that they can rest. But again, 10 commandments. So anything like, you know, honor thy father and thy mother, which the church has expanded that to all sorts of family relationships and looking at it in its broader sense. Mm-hmm. Thou shalt not kill also includes anger and using like character assassination and gossip and all these other things. If people are doing these things, they need to get to confession. You're not going to be burning in hell if you get to confession. But if you have done these things, you really shouldn't be approaching the Eucharist or receiving the Eucharist until you get to confession. Yeah. Again, the whole list. Anything under the 6th commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. It's not just adultery. It's any sexual sin. And again, that's pretty rampant because they say the rise of internet pornography, if people are consuming internet pornography in large quantities and acting upon it, you shouldn't come to Holy Communion. Mm-hmm. Fornication, adultery, sodomy. I mean, I can go through all the traditional things that we have Where today the culture is saying, oh, what's the big deal? There's no big deal there. Whatever,
No, we're celebrating these things.
Well, let's not bring that up. The month of the Sacred Heart for the month of June. That's all I'm going to say. It always has been and always will be. But even going down, bearing false witness, lying, coveting their neighbor's goods, coveting their neighbor's things, taking from somebody something that doesn't belong to you. I don't think people realize the gravity of the 10 Commandments anymore. I really don't. Mm-hmm. And that's why I do my best to try to remind them. I encourage them to listen to certain podcasts. I ask them to go listen to the Catechism in a Year. And I got such a kick out of the Catechism in a Year when Father Mike was doing the introduction to the third pillar, which is the morality pillar. He even admits, I think it was Dr. Mary Healy, that's going to be coming up soon. He even admits, he goes, everybody with the first 2 pillars had no problem. The one on what we believe, I believe in God the Father Almighty. The one on the sacraments, the 7 sacraments. People, yes, Father, yes, okay, I'm on board with that. And then you get to the pillar on morality.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, oh, I don't buy that. Hold on a second.
Living the Christian life.
That's the title of it, yep.
Yeah. And
that's the one that people would rather say, well, I'll take some of that with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me just keep all my religion up here. That's as far as it's going to go.
And that again is why I believe so many parishes now are doing so much more with this Feast of Corpus Christi. I started it when I first became pastor. I was assigned to the Church of the Blessed Sacrament. Mm. And I asked them, do you do a procession on Corpus Christi? And everybody looked at me like I had 5 heads. I'm like, this is the Church of the Blessed Sacrament. I mean, you don't have to do anything grand, but we should do something.
Right.
And so that very year we started something, and we just did a short little thing around the corner to the other side where the gymnasium was, the old gymnasium, and just did a little benediction there. Each year expanding it a little bit more. I understand now my successor there has even lengthened the route of the path that he takes. When I first came here, again, they really weren't doing it, so we started it up. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that first year was COVID, so that made it a little dicey. But after that, every year since, we've done a little thing, and we like to go out and we go around the block, and we come all the way through the parking lot, and we go to the location where we do the outside mass and sing some songs there and then do a benediction. Right. I think plenty of pastors have been trying to do as much as they can to bring back that aspect of, this isn't just something I do once a week that I consume and I'm good with God.
Right.
This is a relationship that I have to have day and night. Mm-hmm. And so I admit I'm spoiled. As a priest, you're probably spoiled too. I live in a rectory where there is a small chapel that has the Blessed Sacrament, so that any time of the day or night, if I need to be in the presence of Jesus, I'm there.
Yeah, I've been fortunate. Most of the assignments that I've had in Brooklyn and Queens, we've either had a chapel inside the rectory, or the rectory has been attached to the church. So it's just a matter of opening up a couple of doors and going into the church. Even in the middle of a storm, I can go out like this, and I can pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament. It's just a wonderful gift, and it's one of the things that I miss now as a retired priest. I live out here on the weekends, but then during the week I'm back home, and aside from celebrating Mass, that's the extent of my Eucharistic devotion, my Eucharistic piety.
Unfortunately, but that's going to be changing again soon.
That'll be changing soon, God willing.
But again, I was reading that little pamphlet that we gave to everybody from Bishop Barron on prayer, and there's the one section on the Holy Hour. And he talked about the Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen Holy Hour. But Bishop Sheen, God bless him, he's going to be beatified soon, had this whole thing where every time he did priest retreats, he always talked about the Holy Hour. A daily Holy Hour with the Blessed Sacrament.
Right.
Having that relationship. I say that to any believer. Try to, even if you just give me 10 minutes in a church, just slip into a church before the Blessed Sacrament on your way home from work, or on your way to work or something. We're blessed here because we're able to leave the church open pretty much the entire day. I know there are neighborhoods where pastors are forced to lock their churches, and that's just a real tragedy to the people because they don't have the access to the Blessed Sacrament.
Right.
But everybody should be doing a Holy Hour as often as you can, or at least coming before the Blessed Sacrament as often as you can. It's, I think, a critical part of our spirituality.
Even if it's a matter of coming to Mass just a little bit earlier and sitting quietly in prayer before the Blessed Sacrament. St. John Vianney used to tell the story of the man he saw in the church in Ars, and day after day after day, sitting there. And he said to the man, he says, what exactly are you doing? He said, well, I sit here and I look at him and he looks at me and we speak to one another. Silently, But, I think we've sort of lost that art of a quiet prayer and communication. It's like, I've got to be active, I've got to be doing, No, just sit there and open yourself to the presence of God.
All of my spiritual directees, I give them the same thing that they have to do if they want to come to me for direction. You got to go into a church, you've got to sit still, and you got to stay before the Blessed Sacrament for 10 minutes. But here's the condition. You can't start the clock ticking until the monkey brain stops. So, like the flinching, it's like, I got, start the clock ticking again. Oh my God. Because we're so distracted now. Our ADHD spirituality is really hurting us. But if someone can just give me they finally settle their soul for just 10 minutes, they're going to realize how much more powerful those 10 minutes were than the 45 minutes it took them to get the 10 minutes started.
Yeah.
Because we are so distracted. And I think the phones have made it worse because people, they'll be sitting there, they'll think of something and they want to go look it up. I'm like, no, put the phone away. Not even one of your apps to say prayers. You want to say prayers at another time from an app? Go ahead and take the phone out then. I'm talking about that real painstaking silence that you're referencing, of just sitting there and listening.
Mm-hmm.
Just listen for the voice of God. People say they don't hear the voice of God. How much noise is in your life?
Well, because you're talking too much, that's why.
You can't get a word in edgewise.
Yeah, conversation goes both ways. It's not just a matter of us talking, but also of us listening to the other.
The modern world, the invention of the radio, the television, now computers, cell phones, all these different things, I think really has just retrained people's minds to just not be able to not be distracted.
Right. Yeah.
I just find that, again, to be a real problem for a lot of people. So my encouragement to all of you is try to do those 10 minutes if you can. Every day, just quiet your soul for those 10 minutes. Big, big step. Closer than we realize, that's been our message series for these 3 feasts. Closer than we realize, and again, I'm going to say this, God is so much closer than we realize. And I go with that word realize because it's not closer than we think, which is what the mind wants to do. We have to make it real. So he's there, he's present to us, but until I make it real for me, until I realize how close he is, his closeness is just nothing. I enter a church, there's the Blessed Sacrament in front of me. If I don't realize his presence, I don't accept and look at him as really being present, it's a lost thing for me.
Yeah, we give them the helper. The sanctuary lamp is lit. It means Christ is there.
Really, truly present, body,
really,
blood, soul, and divinity.
And not just during the celebration of the Eucharist, not just during the Eucharistic prayer or the consecration or receiving communion. He's there. As long as that lamp is lit, it's an indication that the Blessed Sacrament is present in that tabernacle.
Even when the tabernacle is empty, even like on Good Friday when we moved the Blessed Sacrament to an alternate tabernacle, and you enter a church in that starkness, his presence still remains in a different way.
Right.
And so I always say that's why the church is a place set apart. We should be stepping out of the world into that heavenly realm that we call the church. I think a lot of people have lost that reverence as well, that even a Catholic church with the Blessed Sacrament, like on Good Friday, he's still going to be present to you.
Well, he's present in his people, in his mystical body gathered together in prayer. But he's present par excellence in the sacrament.
Absolutely. But the reason that I point that out is because the church should be the place that we go to escape the world. So even when the Blessed Sacrament's not there, we're still entering his presence. We're still in his temple. We're still in his space. Because I think, people can do it with other things. If you enter into a gymnasium and you see weights all over the place, you're not going to want to break out into a rosary there. But if I enter into a church, I want to pray. If I go into the kitchen, I'm not going to expect to do a Divine Holy Hour there, but I might make myself some breakfast or lunch.
Right.
Places have designations for a reason, and I think it's okay for us to say the church is set apart for a particular thing. And thank God we're Catholic. Thank God we have the Blessed Sacrament in all of our churches.
The house of God, and the house of the church. The Domus Dei, the Domus Ecclesiae.
And again, so important. Among the little things that I want to do is what I like to call my Father Peter pet peeves. I have my little pet peeves of the way people receive Holy Communion. Now, you know this because as a priest, you've been giving communion to people for a long, long time. The norm remains reception on the tongue and kneeling. That's the actual normative way, but there have been dispensations given by different bishops' conferences so that people can receive in the hand standing up.
Right.
The norm for the most part in this country had become standing up, receiving in the hand. But it was never promulgated in such a way that it abrogated that the actual norm is receiving on the tongue. How many times I give out communion to somebody, and I love the piety of somebody who wants to receive on the tongue, but they approach and they give me what I call the little mail slot without opening their mouth. It's like, open up your mouth and give me a landing strip for the body of Jesus Christ. So stick the tongue out a little bit, open your mouth, tip your head back, so, all of that. I thank God that you have the piety and you want to receive on the tongue, but help me out landing Jesus where he belongs.
Right.
Then there are the people who come up on the communion line, and most people I don't think realize, maybe we need better catechesis, but the Father Peter pet peeves. First off, to receive in the hand, I want to be clear about this. If you are right-handed, the right hand goes first, the left hand goes on top of it, and you make a flat space so that the host can go there. So don't come up like this, and don't come up like this, and don't come up like... I got to have a place to put Jesus. Now, how many times you go to give out communion, and you're looking, and you're like, where am I going to place him? I'm doubting in my head. So your dominant hand is on the bottom. You pick up the host with your dominant hand. You put it in your mouth immediately. There are also the people I call the body snatchers. You hold up the body of Christ and they grab it from you.
Yep.
Please, please don't be a body snatcher. There are the popcorn Jesus people that I call them. They put the dominant hand on the top by accident. I put the host on it. They don't know what to do. So they pop Jesus into their mouth. Please, please, it's such a sacred and reverent moment. Take time to think it through.
One thing that I've noticed a few times, in fact, even at the 12 o'clock Mass today, people coming with their hands covered.
No.
So it's not going to go in the hand. It goes into the mouth at that point.
And there's also the ones who imitate their grandmothers. They have their rosaries wrapped all around their hands. And Grandma had her rosary wrapped around the hand because when Grandma went to communion, she received on the tongue.
Right.
If there are objects in your hand, I can't place it on your hand again because I can't place it on top of your rosary.
Right. And also Grandma was praying the rosary because the Mass was in Latin. And priest said his prayers and I was going to say mine.
Pretty much. So was, and again, I think that's why the words full active participation were kind of foisted from the council, but in the wrong way.
Yeah.
Basically what the bishops wanted is pay attention to what's happening in front of you. So all these other devotions, while nice, could be done before or after Mass. It's what we have to deal with today.
One of the things on receiving in the hand.
And it's an indult to let you do that.
It is, but it's also an ancient practice of the Church. St. John Chrysostom told his people, when you come for communion and receive it in the hand, imagine that you're going to receive gold dust, and that with that care, that you're receiving something very, very precious. And so receive it as something very, very precious. So you have to be careful how you're holding your hands if you want to receive in the hand as opposed to on the tongue.
That which is believed on the inside is expressed on the outside. Yeah. If I truly believe it's the body, blood, soul, and divinity, my demeanor would be completely different. And for many people, it is very different.
Yeah.
I don't want to get through this without saying, too, there are certain postures that the Eucharist demands. So when entering a church, for those who are physically able, a genuflect. Lowering yourself to one knee, which came from somewhat of an imitation, too, of like royalty. So like when royalty would enter the room and you would approach the king or the queen, you would get down on one knee in front of them in a submission of self in humility. How much more so for the King of Kings and Lord of Lords? And so when we enter a church, just that little reminder of lowering myself in humility before the Lord by genuflecting to one knee.
Yeah, as long as your knees work.
That's what I say. It's physically, you have to be able to do it, of course. Or at least a profound bow of reverence to show that I know that the Blessed Sacrament is in front of me and I am going to humble myself before it. Also, too, the posture of kneeling. Again, for those who are physically able to, we kneel during the consecration. We traditionally knelt when we received Holy Communion. I think that that's, again, a similar posture of saying, I lower myself. Like in the early church, they would talk about sometimes, oh, well, the people did kneel. Well, they also had a battalion of Romans about to break in and kill them. They had to be ready to move. No, even then, people still would drop to their knees before their Lord and Savior. So I think it's an appropriate thing to remind ourselves that what we believe on the inside will be expressed on the outside.
Yeah. If memory serves me right, when we were in the seminary, during the Easter season, we remained standing during the time of communion, reception of communion. The other times of the year, we would kneel after, especially during the Eucharistic prayer, but also after having received communion. And
which wackadoo liturgist made us do that?
God knows.
We had some very strange liturgists.
But I think also in the Orthodox churches, they stand after communion during the Easter season. They don't kneel. And the Orthodox, if anybody's going to kneel or prostrate, it's the Orthodox. They put us to shame in those areas. But if memory serves me right, they do stand during the Easter season.
I believe a lot of the piety, though, comes from the fact that down through the ages, when people began to realize where they were and what was going on, their body posture just automatically changed.
Yeah.
I remember my aunt, God bless her, she died at 100 plus years. And even though she had had a stroke and even though she had physical things, she would still sometimes try to kneel. And I would tell, but Aunt Helen, you really can't do that. Well, I want to. All right, so I'd help her get down, I'd help her get up, but God bless her. She just had that piety that she knew where she was and she knew who she was before and was not going to be denied.
Mm-hmm.
That always impresses me. Like, we would talk about like when we would go to places like Medjugorje and we'd go to the outdoor mass there. And because they were developing the place, everything was still gravel. They hadn't put down pavers or anything yet. And people would still drop to their knees on the gravel.
On the gravel, yeah.
Climbing mountains in bare feet. Jagged mountains at that.
And wearing the stones smooth.
Mm-hmm.
Going up to the Apparition Hill or even the Krizhevats.
Mm-hmm.
Stone, I guess it's basically a limestone, but nevertheless, worn smooth by the bare feet of so many pilgrims.
And again, what's believed on the inside will be manifested on the outside. Yeah. So I really think we're at those crossroads because I'm seeing a lot more, especially some young people. And I think this is why we're seeing some of the young people leaning towards the traditional Mass because they want that additional reverence that supposedly will bring about. I've always said, I think the new rite is a beautiful rite. It just was abused for so long that people forgot how beautiful it really is.
Mm-hmm.
So all the accretions and all the weird things that some priests had started doing would make me say, let me go find a rite that's a little bit more reverent.
Well, I'll say it. We were at Mass in Medjugorje a number of years ago, and the abuses that were taking place, and we both walked out, I think, by the time of the...
Liturgical abuses by the priest.
Liturgical abuses that were being done. We walked out, I think, by the time of the opening prayer.
Pretty much he'd already had, I think we counted 14.
Yeah. Not too much time between the sign of the cross and the opening prayer. And we had counted that many.
And yet, there are priests who are coming up, the younger priests who are coming. These were mostly older priests who were doing this.
They were older guys, yeah.
And we've even said this a couple of times too. While there are still some of the older guys out there that just think that, the Mass was theirs to do with it whatever they want, there is actually a line in Sacrosanctum Concilium that says you cannot change anything in the liturgy on your own authority. Notwithstanding, there were guys that were just taking all these liberties and continue to take these liberties. And what happened was people started to say, oh, I like Father so-and-so's Mass. Father so-and-so doesn't own the Mass. Yeah. God owns the Mass. It's his Mass. We do what God has asked us to do. I will say this. When we first got the new translation for the new Missal, Bishop Murphy released a memo with it under penalty of obedience of things that he wanted his priests to no longer do, specifically citing some of these accretions that had come in. Mm-hmm. So no secular greeting at the beginning of Mass. No good mornings, hey, how you doing, what's going on? That was done. The greeting is, the Lord be with you. That's a greeting, period. So get rid of all the secular greetings. One priest I heard at the meeting was going berserk about, what do you mean I can't say good morning to my people? I have to, going on and on. I'm like, Father, the greeting is, the Lord be with you. That's a greeting. I just don't think he could appreciate that.
The Holy Father, I think it was just this past week, doing his Wednesday conference on the Constitution, on the liturgy, on the sacred liturgy. And basically what he said, not only to the priests, but also to the people, is do the red, say the black.
That's it. It's that simple.
You know, I mean, he said it in papalese, but nevertheless, that was his basic point.
This memo from Bishop Murphy was basically that. It's, you know, like we have a richness that's right there in front of us. Just do what's in front of you.
Yeah.
Another thing that was in it, it said to not give out blessings on the communion line. Now, God love Father Francis. He gave out blessings on the communion line to the day he left here. And I wasn't going to tell him not to do it. But I now have people who will come up to me with that expectation of a blessing. The thinking of it goes like this. It's a moment of communion. So someone not receiving communion really shouldn't be on the communion line. But because you have these situations in which non-Catholics are there, priests started to invite everybody to come forward. But if you're not going to receive, just cross your arms and we'll give you a blessing. The best thing I read on that is to encourage people, if they're going to come forward, cross their arms, but then when you get to the minister, show reverence to the Blessed Sacrament and then move along. Mm-hmm. So if you're not in a state of grace, but you still want to come forward, you just come and reverence the thing.
Yeah, all I do now is nod back. That's about it. Now, it gets interesting in some of the parishes in Brooklyn and Queens where we have Eastern Rite Catholics. Their practice is to come up with their arms crossed and their tongues out. Mm-hmm. You know, and then, well, what you want a blessing, you want the sacrament, and then it dawns on me, no, these are Ukrainians or other Eastern rites. Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah, I've had that confusion more than once. Yeah, and you have that, like, now what do I do? Do I give it to him? Do I don't give it? But that split second, you realize, oh yeah, they're probably Eastern Rite.
Yeah.
Actually, all the Indian priests here are Eastern Rite priests, Syro-Malabar and Syro-Malankara. Mm-hmm. So they would probably appreciate that more than we do.
Right.
But again, just going back to all of that, so what the memo pointed out is in 2 seconds at the end of Mass, everybody in the congregation is going to receive a priestly blessing, which is different than the blessing that the priest would give on the communion line. Mm-hmm. 2 things to remember that when I did my research on this, the communion line isn't really for everybody. If you're not Catholic, you shouldn't be coming forward. If you're not in a state of grace, you shouldn't be coming forward. Why? Because you're not in communion with the church.
Spiritually.
Yeah. And that's an important distinction. Do I want to try to be Father Nice once in a while? Yeah, I want to be Father Nice. And if you do come forward, I don't want to make a big thing of it, but just show your reverence to the Blessed Sacrament then and step aside.
I think part of the problem historically is that we've had the ushers going pew by pew, calling the people to come out into the aisle to get online. And, you know, the ushers, if anything, should be standing alongside the minister of Holy Communion.
At this point, yeah.
You know, to make sure that if someone is receiving in the hand, that the host is consumed before they take more than 2 steps.
Absolutely.
You know, but again, that's been a major problem.
That systematic thing has always made me a little crazy. I like the way I've been to churches around the world. I remember one time when I was in Malta with Father Charles, and we went to go give Holy Communion, and people just started coming from every direction. There was no organized line, there was no nothing, so that the person who wasn't going to come up wasn't made basically sportive, but you had to step over them, or they had to step out and then step back in and do all of that stuff. The systematization of our ushers definitely has contributed to the tension for that poor person who was going to say, no, I'm not going to go forward. But it's where we are. So celebrating Corpus Christi is just that reminder that the Blessed Sacrament is not just another thing in my life. It should be the relationship that I live for.
The source and summit.
Amen. Any thoughts you want to add on to this or anything you'd like to contribute?
Not that I can think of off the cuff, but I think we've been doing pretty well.
I think we did fine. I'd just like to take this moment to thank you. If you stuck with us this long, please remember that we do like it when you like us. So that little like button, if you could hit that, we'd appreciate it. If you're not subscribed or following us on whatever app you're listening to this on, remembering that we are on YouTube, we are on Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts. So make sure you click that like or subscribe so that you can just get these updates all the time. I would also too like to throw in there, give me a comment. If you're on YouTube or on Spotify, there's an opportunity to leave a comment. Just let me know that you're out there. Just say hello, say whatever you want, because in the algorithm, comments also factor in to the algorithm picking us up. Of course, we always do have that link down below for the parish if you'd like to make a donation to the parish. As so many of the podcasters out there like to say, we make this podcast without cost to you, but it's not without cost. So if you can help by defraying some of our costs, we'd appreciate that so very much. But again, know that you're in our prayers. I always add a little petition to my prayers saying that God, anybody who hears these words of the podcast, please shed your blessings upon them. And if you have a particular intention, that God listen to that intention and grant it according to his holy will. That notwithstanding, I guess what I could say is thank you, Father Bob, for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure to be out here.
It's great to have you as part of the parish. People have really responded well to you in the year and a half that you've been coming here. And God willing, you'll be able to serve here even more in the future.
God willing.
So how about we close with a prayer?
Sure.
I usually do the prayer. Do you want to do the prayer?
No, you do the prayer.
I'll do the prayer.
You're the pastor.
All right. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord Jesus Christ, you feed us with your body, with your blood. You come so intimately to us that you become part of who we are. Through all the sacraments you give us grace, but most especially what you give us in the Eucharist is your very self. We are so blessed, we are so privileged, and we are so unworthy. And yet you're the one who makes us worthy. By your blood poured out, you have forgiven the sins of all of us. As I come before you now, again and again in the sacrament of reconciliation, asking for that forgiveness, I know that your generosity is such that you will say, my son, you are forgiven. And so I call upon you now, O Lord, as I come before you again and again in the Blessed Sacrament, even in my unworthiness, I trust you, I love you, and I know that you are Lord, that you are the one who forgives. And so I call upon you now to bless all who hear these words. Send your Holy Spirit upon them, give them the grace of your love, and let them know that they are part of your kingdom where you are Lord forever and ever.
Amen.
The Lord be with you.
With your spirit.
May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Go in peace.
Thanks be to God.